You are now listening to the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Welcome to the Radiance Films Podcast, a show dedicated to all things Radiance Films. I am your host, Adam Lundy, and I am delighted to be joined today by podcaster Paul Parks. Hello, Paul.
Hello, thank you for having me on the show.
Not a worry at all. We've been trying to connect for a while. You were supposed to be my guest a few months ago, and things had to get moved around a bit. So I'm delighted to finally, have you on. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, great to be here and great to be talking about movies that I wouldn't normally talk about on my podcast.
Well, this is it. Yeah, I was going to say, why don't you tell the listeners, just in case they're not familiar with what you do, why don't you just talk the listeners through a little bit about yourself and what you get up to?
So my show is called spfilmviewers, and it is predominantly talking about movies with my wife Sophie, who is seeing classics or kind of obscure films that I just want to get a reaction from her for the first time. And then alternate weeks now we kind of do things that we both haven't seen as well, so we're kind of going into it with like open eyes, fresh, and and just exploring cinema together and getting just enjoying ourselves, really talking about it for like a couple of hours. So that's the show.
Yeah, it's a cool idea for a show, being able to sit down and kind of listen to somebody who has seen the stuff and kind of is recommending them, and someone who, has no idea what they're getting into. Like, this is something that I kind of do with my wife as well, a little bit. The odd time I managed to convince her to watch a film with me. Recently we watched, this week, I showed her Touch of Evil. She'd never seen it, and I think that's a masterpiece, 10 out of 10, no notes movie. And afterwards we finished it and I was like, oh, so what did you think? She said, yeah, it's not the worst film you ever showed me. So it's funny, when you get to sit down and kind of show somebody something for the first time, especially if you've already seen it and you already like it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and
so
trying to convince them that this is a good film, I swear.
You see, you have to build that trust there. I didn't build that trust with my wife when I tricked her into watching La Dolce Vita and didn't tell her that it was 3 hours and depressing. So you have to build that trust. I didn't do that, but it's a great idea for a podcast. The links will be in the description for the podcast and for the socials, where you guys post very regularly. You guys keep us up to date with what you're doing, which is good. It's nice to know kind of what episodes are coming up and stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, look, we're going to talk about some Radiant stuff. We're going to talk about the new announcements. So me and Paul are sitting down here on Thursday, the 5th of December. So the announcements just happened just over 24 hours ago. So haven't had a ton of time to do too much research on these titles. I know a little bit about some of them and not a lot about a good chunk of them. So we'll just kind of go through them just to give our reactions and thoughts. I'm just going to go by the order that they're listed here on the website. So I'm going to start off with the one that I've never heard of these films. I've never heard of the filmmaker, but because of the sheer quality of the artwork and how it's put together, it's just become an instant want. I want it now. And that's the Hardboiled box set, which is 3 pulp thrillers by Alain Corneau. Now, I'm not familiar with Alain Corneau as a filmmaker. I do recognize Yves Montand on the cover of the box set. Is a fairly famous French actor from the 70s. The films that are included in this set is the first one is called Police Python 357. The next one is called Série Noire, and the third is called Choice of Arms. And they are described as being in the vein of Jean-Paul Melville, those kind of really cool, sort of gritty 70s neo-noirs that he was famous for. So, Paul, had you heard of any of these films, or had you heard of Corneau? This is all completely new to me when I started reading into it.
Yeah, same. I am not familiar with his work, but it does sound very interesting. And given like 3 different films in the box set. I do like a good box set, and especially something that's to open up the window to opportunities to watch films by a director you haven't seen before is always welcomed. So yeah, they do sound intriguing from the kind of brief synopsis that they're kind of given on the listing on the site and everything. So yeah,
Yeah. And I find that ends up happening nearly every month with Radiance. There's at least one director I've never heard of
yeah,
before
yeah,
that I get to experience for the first time. It happened again
yeah.
this month in the films we're going to talk
Mhm.
about a little bit later. But I'm super excited for this release. Out of all the ones that have been announced yesterday, this is the one I'm most excited for. And I think that's resonated with a lot of people. I've been kind of seeing people react to this online on Bluesky and in Discord channels. Everyone seems to be really hyped about this set, which is triggering my FOMO a little bit because it's limited to 2,500
Yeah,
rather than their standard 3,000. So
three. Yeah.
that 500 less copies is triggering me a little bit. I might have to pre-order it like now just to make sure I don't miss out. Um, yeah, this looks like a great set. Um, I know that there's a good chunk of special features on here. I know that there's a visual essay from, let me just grab the name because it's completely left my soul. Let me pull it up here because I had this information. Yeah, never mind. Oh no, I did. I found it. Paul Martinovich, he's the production manager at Radiance, and he does a visual essay um, about the adaptations of the Jim Thompson novels, which these are. Um,
Okay.
I saw on his Blue Sky, he said this was his first kind of visual essay contribution to Radiance. He normally is the production guy. He puts together the sets. He's the logistics guy. But this is his first time kind of contributing creatively, which is interesting, and I look forward to seeing that. There's a ton of other stuff. There's archival interviews. There's archival documentaries. There's a booklet, an 80-page booklet with writing by various writers, along with newly sort of translated archival writing. So, like pretty much every box set from Radiance, you're definitely going to get your money's worth. I think this is a very good deal of £41 for three films and all the extras you're getting. I think that's excellent value for
Mhm.
money, especially when you consider it's cheaper than say the Louis Buñuel set, for example. So you're still getting the same amount of films. You're getting three films and obviously all the special features. But I think this one's particularly good value. I should be telling everyone not to buy it because obviously I don't want them to run out of stock.
Yeah, exactly.
But I can't in good conscience say that. So I'm sure this one's going to be one of the ones that will sell out really quick. I'll be
Yeah,
surprised
yeah.
if this one lasts as long as some of the other box sets have in the past. The next one then, as listed on the website, is another one that I'm really excited for, because it's a film I've wanted to see for a while, and it's Je t'aime, which is a film by Alain Rene. Are you familiar with Rene's work? Have you seen any of his films?
Not to be honest, a lot of these listings on here I haven't seen, but I am very excited to uh, check this one out based on solely on the what the it reads in the description about an influence on the internal sunshine of a spotless mind,
Uh-huh.
which is like one of my favorite films. So solely on that alone, it's like, yeah, I've got to get this one.
Yeah, that's going to be a big selling
As
point.
yeah.
Yeah, for people unfamiliar with Rene. I haven't seen this film. I've seen his what are probably his two most famous films, which is Hiroshima Mon Amour and Last Year in Marienbad, and they are incredible. They're as far as I'm concerned 5-star movies. He's an incredible filmmaker. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how he tackles this kind of setup, this kind of plot, because a lot of his films, the two that I've seen are all very much centered on the idea of kind of the fallibility of truth and memory and time and how it's all just a kind of a construct, and how we actually experience things in real time in real kind of time doesn't always work like it does in a movie.
Mhm.
So he's a very, very intelligent guy. He's an incredible filmmaker, an incredible artist. His films, despite leaning into the surrealism and intellectualism, they're not standoffish or particularly bookish or anything. They're very artful. His
Hmm.
The way that he moves a camera, he's known for these sort of slow dolly shots and zooms that he does. And they're just you can just get lost in his movies. His film last year in Marienbad, I've said it before on another podcast that film should just play on a loop in every art gallery in the world because it is just every shot is masterpiece of
Hmm.
uh of staging and design and cinematography. So I'm really looking forward to this one. Again, I hadn't seen it, but it was one that was on my radar of a film that I wanted to see. So I'm really happy that Radiance is putting this one out. And I know that a lot of people in the US, who still collect Radiance, they're surprised that Criterion or someone like that hadn't already put it out.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Yeah, it feels like it would be like one of those films by the description and everything. Yeah, but
yeah, it is a major coup for Radiance, I think, because Rene is a huge filmmaker in the art world, in the art film world. This is as big of a get as a lot of the bigger gets like the Buñuel stuff or Haxan. Getting a Rene film, this is a big deal. And I think when more people kind of see this once it comes out, I think it will lead more people onto Radiance as well, who typically were kind of outside of the loop or hadn't picked up on anything because Rene's a huge name and he'll be a huge draw. I'm sure this is another one that's going to sell out very, very quickly. And speaking of directors who are big in the art film world, the last mainline Radiance release we have is called The Eel, and it's by a Japanese director called Shohei Imamura. This one won the Palme d'Or. Apparently, I haven't seen it. In fact, I hadn't even heard of it. I know who Imamura is. I've seen one of his films a couple of years ago called Black Rain, which is sort of set in the fallout of the Hiroshima bombings. It's an incredibly difficult film, but it's very, very good. He has more famous films than that I haven't seen. Are you familiar with Imamura at all?
yeah, the with the when you're bringing up the Black Rain, that's something I'm very bad with this. Like I buy films and they sit on my shelf for a long time. I never get around to watching them.
Oh, that's
So
everyone. Don't worry. That's not
yeah,
a you
yeah.
problem.
But yeah, that name rings a bell with Black Rain. I think I've got a box set of his stuff potentially, or I think the
Yes.
Ballad of Narayama as well. So
Yeah, you're
yeah, so it's
100% right. That
yeah,
was
yeah,
Arrow released a box set a few years ago that
yes,
included The
that's
Ballad of
right. Yeah,
Narayama and
yeah,
Black
yeah,
Rain and a third
I,
film that I can't remember what the
yeah,
third one was. But
yeah.
I have the same box set and that's where I saw Black Rain, but I hadn't
Hmm.
looked into the other ones. But
Hmm.
he has a couple of other films that are very, very highly regarded. Vengeance is Mine is probably his most famous.
Hmm.
But there's also Pigs and Battleships is very much loved. The Ballad of Narayama also, and then another one called The Pornographers. He's a very big deal in Japanese new wave filmmaking. Um, so I always welcome a chance to kind of see a film by a director that I need to experience more of. With Radiance, it tends to
Hmm.
either go one of two ways. Either I'm familiar with the director's work, but I've never seen this film, so it's a
Hmm.
new experience for me in that regard, or I'm just completely blind to it all, both the
Yeah,
film and the director, which is great. It's great to be blind one way or another. I can probably count on one hand the amount of films that I had seen before Radiance had put them out. So
exactly. Yeah.
it's always a great experience. Um, so yeah, that's the Eel. That one's also going to be out. I'm not too sure what to make of it. The plot does sound a little bit bonkers, but
Well,
we'll throw it on when it comes out, and we'll see what we
yeah,
think.
I do think it's. I'm a sucker for Japanese cinema anyway, so I think this is probably another definitely must buy for me, really. And just the fact that he's got a pet eel, and that's the title of the film. It's like, okay, how's that going to play into? Is it, or is it kind of just like just a one note thing that's not really going to be integral to the plot at all? It's kind of just like it's going to be interesting to see how that all intertwines together.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it does
yeah.
does sound a little bit off the wall.
Mhm.
Um, So those are three kind of mainline releases. There is a couple of sort of extras coming out. There's another Raro video release that's coming out, which is one of the partner labels, Rulers of the City. I'd kind of, well, I didn't forget the Raro video, but I'd assumed that maybe the partnership had ended because they hadn't released a Raro video release, I believe, since maybe July or August. It's been a few months and there haven't
Mm.
been any announced. So I'm glad to see they're still doing it. Raro have a big following in the US, so it's nice to still get some of their titles over here. Not that I own many of them, but it's nice to have that option. I know that these kind of Italian films have a lot of admirers
Mhm.
around the world. So I know one sort of close friend of mine in particular loves all their stuff, all the Raro video stuff. He's in the US, so he gets all the stuff that's kind of in region A. And he loves the Italian crime films, especially the really pulpy ones. So he's really happy this is coming out, and I'm sure a lot of people are as well. And then there's also a new volume of Dirty Art House, which is the kind of the kind of pulp magazine that Radiance kind of puts out sporadically. Volume one is no longer available. Volume two and three are still available to buy on the website as of right now when I'm talking, alongside volume four. So if you hadn't kind of bought those before, they're only a couple of quid. I normally just throw them into my basket when I'm doing my order because they're only like like 3 or 4 quid or something like that. And it's a great way of supporting just like critics and like independent critics and writers because they'll just come together on a common team and sort of write about filmmakers discussing a theme. I believe the theme in this volume is all about sort of sex in cinema,
Mhm.
and the different ways that boundaries get pushed. So looking at it here, like some of the films that get talked about in this one would be like In the Realm of the Senses, Anora, the new kind of Sean Baker film, as well as a Zulawski film, a Pasolini film, a Miike film. So a lot of sort of important filmmakers getting touched on in this volume. So if you're into that stuff, that's also available. Going by past, I'm sure it'll be around for a while. I don't think there's as much of a need to kind of pick it up right this second because the only one that's sold out so far is volume one. But like I said, it's only a couple of quid, so I usually just throw it in the basket when I'm kind of doing that month's orders anyway. If you're someone who buys monthly like I do or bit by bit, no harm throwing in that extra little bit of support. Cool. So those were the December announcements for the films that are coming out in March. Yeah, March. So yeah, March will be an interesting one. Like the start of the year has already been so strong. Like every month so far, January, February, March, there's at least two titles that I'm like really, really locked in and excited about. And then another one or two that's like I've never heard of them, but they sound interesting. So like
Mhm.
there's so far it's been a real knockout from an announcement point of view. Obviously, I'll need to watch the films in the new year and make my final thoughts. But in terms of announcements, everything's been great so far. It's been an exciting start of the year.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see what comes out. I'm always excited for the announcements and everything. It's like, oh, is it something I've maybe seen before, wanted to tick off the list and everything like that? And but more often than not, it's like, oh yeah, I've never even heard of this film before, or like by a director, as I say, and then or you recognise the director's name and go, okay, I didn't know even know this was even a thing that he'd done, and like a really like deep cut kind of thing. And it's like, oh well,
Yeah.
it's going to be a great quality and great booklets and all that kind of stuff that they normally Radiants normally do. So it's like it's always an exciting time to hear what they've got to say. And yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny you mention that because we're going to have a very similar conversation with a couple of these films that we're going to talk about now that came out in November. So I'm just going to kind of go through them spine by spine. I'm just going to double check them behind me here. Uh, yeah, this is the first one. So the first one we're going to talk about is Slap the Monster on page one, which is spine number 71. So just to kind of read the kind of synopsis or blurb from the Radiance website. Days before a general election, a young girl is raped and murdered. Bizanti, who's played by Radiance's favorite actor, Gian Maria Volante, the editor of a right-wing newspaper, uses the story to help the conservative candidate his paper supports. Um,
Um, yeah, the ones I've covered, ones I looked into, were. Japanese Organised Crime Boss and the Story of Adele.
Okay,
Story
perfect.
of Adele H. Yeah.
Cool. That's fine. I'll just kind of briefly talk about this one myself then. Um, with Slap the Monster on page one. So this is basically a kind of a hybrid film. It's part social drama, part crime. I don't want to say thriller. It's not exactly a thriller per se. I guess kind of more of a poliziotecchi or a giallo type film. But it really balances that through line. And Gianmaria Volante, he plays, like I said, the editor of this newspaper, and he is just the biggest scumbag possible because he just does not give a fuck about what he says or what the newspaper puts out, so long as it's to help the cause. And I sat there watching this last week, and I was just stunned and just seething watching it because we live in a time now where the media controls the narrative so much, and different media outlets
Mm.
blatantly lie or suppress truths or change facts in order to sway the public. And it was crazy watching this film because, it was made in 1976, I think, if I remember correctly, and obviously set in Milan. And I'm like, you could literally just change the location and the year to Washington in 2024, and the story would be the same. You don't have to change a single thing, and it would still be
Mm.
relevant. Um, it's an infuriating film, but it's a brilliant film. It's incredibly well made. It's directed by a guy called Marco Bellocchio, who I hadn't seen anything from. He has a very famous film called Fists in the Pocket, which I haven't gotten a chance to see. It's been on my watch list for years, literal years. And I need to get around to seeing it now that I've watched this one. But Volante is excellent as he is in every release that Radiance has put out featuring him. He's an incredible actor. He slithers through scenes like a snake. He is just nothing behind his eyes. He's just pure evil. Um, but but it's not like expressive evil, like he's a villain going wahaha and twiddling his
Mhm.
mustache. He's just cold. He's just cold and just does not care. There's an incredible scene halfway through the film where his wife is watching him deliver a press conference, and he's just telling lies. He's just sitting there like just telling absolute lies, and his wife is like, I can't believe this has happened. I can't believe what's going on in this city. And he just looks at her as like, are you stupid? You should be smarter than the people who believe what I'm saying. And it's just incredible that, like, even his own wife believes him, and he scolds her for believing his lies. That she should be smarter than that. It's yeah, it's an amazing film. It was one that, again, I'd never heard of. It was one I was a little bit kind of maybe less excited about watching this month. There was a couple of ones I was a bit more excited about, and this ends up happening more months than others, where the one that I don't expect to be great ends up being the best one of the month. And that was this for me. I really enjoy Italian cinema, especially Italian social cinema in general. So this was kind of right up my alley to begin with. But if you want a film that is a really interesting story, like the actual mystery and stuff of the murder and that takes place is intriguing. So if you like that, but then you also want a film that still retains its relevancy, 50 nearly 50 years later, um, then this is an absolute recommend for anyone listening. Really an incredible film. I cannot recommend it high enough.
But that sounds, from what you described, that really does sound intriguing as a watch, because that was one that was, again, probably like you, Adam, where it's like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm gonna like this one just from the basis of it, but you've definitely kind of sold me on the fact of how you've described, like how for a villain who's kind of like just like malicious in like how he acts and just is so brutal and cold and everything like that, but just sort of like gets away with it kind of thing in that sense. That really does sound right up my alley, in fact. Like
Yeah,
with yeah.
it's very very good, and but like I said, it will make you angry, especially if you're anyway left leaning. You will be very angry watching this movie, just because of how nothing's changed. It's all the same.
Yeah.
So I'll say that it's a very politically charged film. So if you don't like politics in your cinema, maybe skip it. But it's a very politically charged film, and it can be a bit of a raw watch, especially if you're someone who's left leaning. Then you know it might be something that will make you rather infuriated. So we'll move on then to the other film then that you haven't seen, just so I'll get kind of a bit about that out of the way as well, and then we can talk about
Hmm.
the ones that you did. So
Yeah.
the other film, which I think coincidentally is next on the spine list, um, yeah, it is, but that's actually worked out perfectly, and it is Panic in Year Zero. So I was really excited for this film for one reason only. I adore Ray Milland. He is one of my favorite actors of the kind of classic Hollywood, you know, the 40s, 50s Hollywood era. He's one of my favorite actors from that time. I love everything that he does, but I never knew that he made movies. I never knew that he had directed some, and this was his third or fourth film that he directed. After he had a bit of a kind of a late career renaissance where he started, you know, making sort of more, I guess you wouldn't really call them independent films, but sort of films with lower budgets, you know, that Roger Corman would have produced. This was around that time he was getting into that stuff, and he made this film which was financed by Roger Corman, and he stars in it and he directs it. And it's Panic Year in Year Zero, which to kind of give the blurb from the website to save me kind of poorly describing it. When Harry Baldwin, who's Raymoland, takes his family on a fishing trip, their holiday is brutally interrupted as a catastrophic atomic war breaks out, destroying their suburban Los Angeles home. What remains of the United Nations announces on the radio that society is broken down, and the Baldwins realize that they must quickly learn how to navigate this new year zero and do whatever it takes in order to survive. That sounds very like over the top and like super like you know like a kind of action apocalypse film. This film is as subdued as you can get because it's cheap. We never even see the bomb. It's sort of all kind of just discussed. There's no big action. There's no huge set pieces or anything. It's all shot on backlots. It's very much a essentially a family film in the sense where it's about you know a family's relationship with one another and how they change by these new circumstances. Um, the film does not waste any of its runtime, which is not particularly long anyway. I believe it's only about 80 minutes, something along those lines. It doesn't waste any time. I believe the bomb, quote unquote, falls within the first like 5 minutes. It's very quick cutting to the chase, and the characters all go through their own kind of individual genesis as they kind of come to terms with everything. Ray Milan goes from being this very, you know, just just very kind of all American normal 50s dad, to suddenly beating people up and pointing guns at people's faces. He kind of flips very very quickly. His son, who's played by Frankie Avalon, who was a teen pop idol in the 60s. His son again kind of goes from being this kind of he starts off kind of like a rebel without a cause type, teenager, the collar up, thinking he's too cool. But again, he's kind of changed by the circumstances and kind of grows up into be this kind of mature person, to help his family get through these tough times. Um, and like with all kind of apocalypse films, as society breaks down, bad people show up and they have to try and protect themselves against these people. But there's no huge set pieces. I kind of liken the whole film in terms of like the scope would be, it's closer to something like not Night of the Living Dead than it
Okay.
is to like any like like Children of Men or War of the Worlds or anything like that. That's very large in scope. This is very much like a family trapped in a very kind of relatively small area as they try to survive the new circumstances, and people keep showing up to fuck with that. So it's a very low key film, but it's good. It's not amazing or anything. It's not the best film I've ever seen, but it's a fun time.
Mhm.
I'm someone who quite likes low budget films, especially of this
Mm.
era. I just like how they look. I prefer them to like the big cinematic sweeps. I prefer a low budget film. So it suits me really well. Some people might find it a bit schlocky or a bit hokey. And it kind of is in a sense, in a way. The main villains of this film are a bunch of beatniks. It's not it's not exceptionally high stakes. But it's I find it a fun time, and I think if you're someone who enjoys, and by I mean listeners, if you're someone who enjoys, maybe kind of a low budget, low, not necessarily low stakes, but maybe a low cinematic scope, just enjoying kind of characters grow close to another in a short period of time in a smaller location. Um, then I think this film is certainly enjoyable. And there's some really good special features on this as well. There's an interview with Kim Newman, who of course was my guest on the last episode. And we talked a little bit about that at the end of the last episode, and why he got involved with this. But he has an interview on this, which is, gives a lot of context. And there's also a really great essay by Christina Newland in the booklet that's included. So once again, with Radiance, you're getting your money's worth from a special feature standpoint as well. But yeah, like I said, I was really excited for this one again because I'm a Ray Milland stan. I'll watch pretty much everything that he's in. And yeah, I'm intrigued to kind of go and try and find the other films that he directed, because I think he directed maybe another, apart from this one, I think he directed three, maybe four others, that were all kind of similar in scope in terms of like low budget character driven affairs. So I'm interested to seek those out. But yeah, if you like that kind of stuff, I'd recommend checking this out if you get a chance as well.
Yeah, no, I'm all for like that 50s kind of like a big like B movie monster fan as well, of that ilk. So that sounds kind of something like, obviously there's no monsters in it as such, but
Yeah, no, but it,
yeah,
it definitely does have
has
that
that
kind of
vibe.
aesthetic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely has that aesthetic. It is almost like a B movie monster movie without the monster.
Hmm.
They couldn't even afford that. So, but everything else is pretty much bang on in terms of the aesthetics and stuff like
Cool.
that.
Great.
Cool. So let's talk about the ones that you have seen. Let me just double check the order. Yeah, Japan Organized Crime Boss is the first one that we're going to talk about. So this is a Kinji Fukasaku movie. I believe, is it the second or the third Fukasaku movie that they've put out?
I think it's the third, I think, because I've got is it Yakuza Graveyard on the
Oh
shelf?
yes, that was one I
Yeah.
was forgetting. Yakuza Graveyard and
Yeah.
then Sympathy for the Underdog is the other one. So it is the
Yeah.
third. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, let me just go through the kind of synopsis and then we can get into it. So the synopsis for this one is two major Yakuza factions from Tokyo and Osaka battle over control of Yokohama, using local gangs as their proxies. Amid this struggle, Tsukamoto, the head of one of the local gangs, is released from an 8-year prison sentence. The feud forces him into action, but he learns that those pulling the strings have political connections and that he is up against overwhelming forces. It's so hard describing a Fukasaku film in 3 sentences. They gave it a really good go.
Mhm.
It does essentially sum it up. But with like with all Kinji Fukasaku films, there is a lot of plot and not a lot of runtime. And this film is no different in that front. I've said this on a couple of episodes, I think already, and certainly on other podcasts. I'm not the biggest Fukasaku Yakuza film guy, um, because I feel like if I look away from 30 seconds, I have to start the movie again.
And
They
I know
move at such a pace.
I know what you mean. Yeah, it is a bit like a quick like uh, quick moving. Like, oh wait, what? That's the plot's moving on. Right, okay, yep. On to the
Yeah,
next thing now. Yeah.
it's very uncompromising
Yeah,
in like
yeah,
he expects you to give him his full attention for 90
yeah,
minutes and he will accept nothing less than that.
yeah.
God forbid you blink when watching his movies. I said it years ago on another podcast, after I'd watched Battles Without Honor and Humanity. I'd watched the first one, and I said it's like The Godfather on 3 times speed. Um, And this film is not much dissimilar. Now I'm kind of saying disparaging stuff, but I actually did enjoy this film, which surprised me a little bit because this was the one I was absolutely least looking forward to watching, just because I had had, I don't want to say negative experiences
Yeah.
with Yakuza films, but I had never loved one apart from the Taikeido ones, which are a little bit different anyway. They're not strictly the same kind of Yakuza films that Fukasaku is famous for making. So I was pleasantly surprised by this film.
Yeah, I would say that I was excited to check this out based on the fact of what I do really like. I did really like Yakuza Graveyard. So I was like, oh yeah, right, another film from him in the kind of similar vein. I wasn't as struck up on this one for some reason. I don't know what would be the sort of difference that would kind of like behind that as to why I didn't connect with it as much. Although there certainly were things I did really like and pick up on the fact, certain with the style of things, like particularly. Um, I recall from Yakuza Graveyard where there's sort of like that Dutch angles going on
Mm.
with the camera and everything. Like I'm guessing that's like maybe like a signature thing he likes to do. Yeah, I don't think I've seen many other of his work, much of his work, but I feel like that's something that he just by seeing two films, that it's kind of like something that he kind of incorporates into film to kind of get a bit of an edge to it, rather than just keeping like a stationary camera kind of just like tilted and adverse your expectations with what's going on in the scene and everything like that. So that was something, and um, I did really appreciate like sort of like our main character who is Tsukamoto. In it's like one particular scene that's kind of stood out to me is obviously when he's confronting one of the like the big Yakuza bosses. And he kind of like this has this stoic stance when he's kind of like facing him, and he's like, he's beaten down, but he keeps getting back up, kind of thing. It's like I
Mm.
always really like that in a character. Like he just like, won't take no shit from anybody, really. And he's in a way that because he does that, he kind of like the other guy's taken aback by it, and he's like, oh, he doesn't know what to do with himself, kind of thing. And that's so rather than just like completely beaten down and like to a bloody pulp. That's not the case. But obviously, just take a few hits and even takes a scar across his face, and it's like, oh, like I wasn't expecting that, and it's like, is that's quite surprising for what it is. But yeah, no, throughout the thing, so like there's other elements of it that was kind of intrigued with that, especially of that other the main like older Yakuza boss, and he has always has like a gang of troops with him essentially, looking out for him, like always like what watching his back essentially. You can't like you don't feel safe around him. Like at any moment they could just like off you off pretty quickly and everything like that. So there's a lot of um, intrigue with what's comes out to play and like. But I guess that's the nature of these Yakuza films, like even with other gangster films as well. You'd never know at any point who's going to be killed next or something's going to happen to somebody and all that kind of stuff. So yeah,
Yeah, for sure. They definitely do lean into the realism a lot.
yeah,
That scene that you mentioned, where Tsukamoto is kind of having it out with the other Yakuza boss because he's trying to get one of his guys
mm,
back.
yeah,
It's a great scene because it's the guy he's kind of having this out with is Tomisaburo Wakayama.
hmm,
Fantastic actor. He's obviously the star of the Bounty Hunter trilogy that Radiance
yes,
put
yeah.
out.
Another-
Probably most well known for the Lone Wolf and Cub series. Um, that would be his main claim to fame. He's a great actor. He's actually really good. There's actually a few different actors that are in small enough roles in this film that have shown up in other Radiant stuff.
mhm.
And I'm now at that point where I'm like Leo, on the couch pointing. Like, oh,
Yeah,
I know,
exactly.
I know him.
Yeah.
So especially it was actually quite funny when Tsuburo Wakayama's character is introduced. He's described as a lone wolf, and I had a Leo moment like, wait, hold on,
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
um, which is funny because this film came out like 3 years before Lone Wolf and Cub, so this is
Mhm.
definitely a translator just having fun. They saw an opportunity that they could translate that to roughly mean lone wolf,
Yeah.
and they decided to have some fun, which I love. That's great. I'm sure translators don't often get a chance to have that much fun, to have a
Hmm.
meta joke. So I'm sure they were delighted when they saw that opportunity. There's also a small role for Noboru Ando, who's in the Taikeido Yakuza films, as he's the guy with one arm, who
Hmm.
kind of tries to kind of help Tsukamoto get revenge on the Dano organization head who screwed him over, and he has a couple of great scenes as well. So it's a very well put together cast. Even the kind of romance subplot is interesting. The dynamic that Sakamoto has with the sister of his kind of fallen best friend. Even
Hmm.
even that's quite interesting. Um, so yeah, like I said, I was surprised that I liked this one as much as I did. I still found that there was a lot of there was a lot of what's the word, exposition dumps,
Like a
especially at the start of the
Yeah,
film.
yeah. I was going to say, yeah, at the very start, it feels like documentary style kind of thing, or something
You
like
feel
that. You're
like
like
you have to have a
infomercial.
notepad,
Yeah,
and just kind of be writing, okay, this is Dano organization, okay, and this is the guy who
yeah.
has had the. You have to, you almost feel like you have to be writing it down so you can keep track.
Hmm.
So there's, and that's actually quite common, really, with Fukasaku's movies. He does tend to have these exposition dumps. He's like, I couldn't be bothered actually kind of do this organically. Here's the information you need. Keep that in mind. Let's start the
Hmm.
movie.
Yeah.
Which I kind of respect. He doesn't really fuck around. He's just getting into the meat and potatoes, which I don't really have a problem with. But it can make it a little bit difficult to keep track of who you're actually supposed to be following. But generally, I thought the cast was very good, especially the two I mentioned with Wakayama and Ando, their supporting roles.
Mhm.
Despite being small, relatively inconsequential roles, they were, it was nice to see them, and their characters were fun. Um, and I definitely agree with that. You mentioned the Dutch angles. Some of the framing in this was really excellent. It kind of
Mhm.
goes from being, like I said, these really extreme Dutch angles to the point where like I'm worried the camera guy's gonna fall over.
It's all over, yeah.
Um, so like there's some really extreme ones, and then there's also just like these really pretty shots of like trees and lakes
Mhm.
and stuff like that. So he does mix it up a little bit. It's not all gritty. But then when it does get gritty, he does really go documentary style. You think of the scenes kind of showing the battles between the proxies, and that's
Yeah.
very almost like newscaster in amongst the rubble style, running around with a handheld camera, getting in people's faces, getting dirty, getting sweaty. So it is a real mix of styles in this film. Fukasaku is clearly a very talented filmmaker. He knows how to make you know film different things in different ways to
Yeah.
really push an emotion or a connection or for you to kind of connect to a scene in a particular way. He knows when to kind of push the different buttons to change the style. Um, it makes me want to go back and kind of rewatch the previous ones and maybe kind of crack open my old Arrow box set for Battles Without Honor and Humanity and maybe give them another run. I believe this was like his first like true Yakuza film that he would, then do later. So
Yeah.
this was kind of his blueprint, I guess, for what would come later on. So perhaps there's a reason why I'm kind of connecting to it in this way because it's him kind of getting used to this new style as well as the viewer. But yeah, it does make me want to maybe revisit some of the ones that I'd watched in the past that I didn't really connect with, and make sure that my phone is turned off the other side of the room, that my
Mhm.
wife and child have left the house, that my dog is outside, that my blinds are down, that I have headphones on, and that I don't blink. I'll just do what they did in Clockwork Orange.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, yeah, yeah,
That I think
exactly.
that's probably Fukasaku's preferred way that
Yeah.
you watch his movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like I should go back and revisit them. Like I said, I didn't love this movie. It's certainly not my favorite of the month.
Mhm.
But it's a good film, and that's coming from somebody you can trust me because I don't really like Yakuza movies. So if I'm saying it's good, it's you can trust my opinion on that.
Mhm. Yeah, speaking of the Arrow set, the battle without human honor and humanity, that's another thing that's on the shelf, but I just haven't got round to watching. So that would be something to crack open at some point. I think going through his work, and revisiting Graveyard of not Graveyard, Yakuza Graveyard, and this one again, and I say like just to get a sense of his style and yeah, enjoy. I think, as I say, like for me, Japanese films are always something that I have a soft spot for. So I always you generally put those over other films that I want to dive into, especially if it's horror related. But yeah,
Yeah, I'm sure we'll be getting plenty more as well. These
yeah,
Yakuza films get a lot of
yeah.
love
They
from
do.
people who
Yeah.
aren't me. So I'm sure we'll be getting plenty more Fukusakus, hopefully more Taikedos as well. I really enjoyed those ones. But I'm sure we'll be getting more Fukusakus and the likes probably as the year goes on. I'll be surprised if we don't get another one this year. I know that we are getting in January, we're getting a Seijun Suzuki film, which I actually don't know actually for sure if it is a Yakuza film per se, but it's certainly a crime film. That's the one that is called, I've completely blanked, Underworld Beauty. We are getting another Fukusaku, of course, in January as well. Hokuriku Proxy War, or is that February? Yeah, that's February actually.
February. Yeah.
We're getting Hokuriku Proxy War, which I'm intrigued about because, and I mentioned this on the episode where I did a reaction to this. I believe wholeheartedly that any genre film can be elevated if you put it in the snow. So the fact that this is in the snow means that
No.
it's already going to be better than every Yakuza film that I've seen just because it's in the snow. So I'm looking forward to that one anyway. That's the only Yakuza film so far, but I'll be surprised if we don't get at least one more. Maybe not another Fukusaku, but I'll be surprised if we don't get another one before
Yeah.
the year is out. Cool. Any final thoughts on Japan Organized Crime Boss?
Um, just looking through notes. I think the only thing is like the fact that it felt like there was like a there wasn't much. It was very much male orientated, really. But I guess that's
Hmm.
normally it is with these crime or Yakuza films as well, in this instance. But the women didn't get much of a looking, you normally have like some dames, don't you, or something like that, or like bits on the side, as it were, that they would have some kind of involvement in, like maybe some kind of betrayal and stuff. But I think they're mainly shortcut, really, aren't they? There's like one of the I forget his name now. I think is it the one with the one arm? His wife gets killed. Is that right? Am I that right? Yeah,
His wife has a very brief role in the
yeah.
film. I can't remember if she gets killed or not, to be honest.
I
But
think
yeah, she has a very brief role in the film, and then also we have the kind of main female character would be the sister of the main character's kind of
mm,
best friend
yeah,
who dies very early in the film. That's not a spoiler. It's kind of one of the driving parts of the plot. And then he kind of looks after his sister, and then romantic stuff starts to
yeah, in
blossom.
shoes, yeah, yeah,
But yeah, there's not much room for female characters, which I think is probably just more so of a societal thing.
yeah, perhaps.
Both with Japan at this time and just the nature of the characters that we're dealing with. I just don't think it was there was a lot of female involvement, and I'm happy to be corrected by that if anyone who actually knows Japanese history is if that's wrong and the films just don't portray that, then I'd love to know myself, just out of curiosity. But if I was making a guess as to why there wasn't a ton of female presence, I would assume it's just based on what would have been the norm in this kind of world in real life.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, speaking of a film that is all about female presence, that's a great segue. The last film we're going to talk about is a Francois Truffaut film, and it's called The Story of Adele H. To give the synopsis from the Radiance website, the year is 1863. Adele Hugo is the daughter of legendary poet and novelist Victor Hugo. After falling in love with the British soldier Lieutenant Pinson, Adele sails by herself to Nova Scotia, intending to persuade Pinson to marry her. Pinson casually rejects her advances unperturbed. She continues to pursue him, and her obsession becomes wilder and more desperate, leading her to become an increasingly outcast from society. Um, So I'd mentioned earlier that we were going to be talking about a film that I know the director, but I'd never heard of this film, and this is it. And this has been a common trend for Radiance because I would consider myself a Truffaut fan. I've seen quite a bit of his new wave era films, but everything that Radiance has put out by Truffaut, I had never even heard of before. This is their third Truffaut film that they've put out, and I'd never heard of any of them. So it's great that they can put out films by a filmmaker that I would be quite familiar with, but still finding stuff that's good and hasn't been seen and put out elsewhere, and that to the point where it wasn't even on my radar. Um, the film stars Isabel Adjani, who most people will know from Possession,
Hmm. Yep.
the Zulawski horror film. People who have no taste will know her from Ishtar, the Elaine May film. I mean that tongue in cheek. I know Ishtar has its audience. It's not me, but it has its audience. But she was very young doing this film. I believe she was cast when she was 19, and then the film came out when she was 20. At the
She-
time, she was the youngest woman ever nominated for an Oscar for Best Performance. Um, and I'm a little bit hot and cold on this film. Um, I think that Ajani's performance is amazing. It's one of the best performances I've seen this year. She absolutely just controls everything. Everything is about her, both from a narrative point of view, but also from a technical point of view. She controls everything. Every shot, it's her. She is like a gravitational force in this film. She is equally able to pull off delicate and out of control and a million mental illnesses and just so much emotion in different scenes and so much range. It's an incredible central performance. My main issue is that there's just not a whole lot else around that.
I know what you mean. Yeah, I say I'm mainly drawn to the film for the fact that it's a Truffaut film and that she's the star of the film. And so it's like, well, okay, that sounds really interesting because I have only seen her in Possession. So it's like, oh, she gives a great performance from that film. So I want to see if she's got the range from a younger age, like from the of that caliber. And don't get me wrong, I think she does a lot of carrying through the film, but I guess
Hmm.
she is the soul that the story's about her essentially. So she's got to, otherwise, it'd be pretty rubbish if she that she didn't give a good performance, and it's her tale essentially. But yeah, the story for itself, like how it played out and everything, is a bit like I don't know, like I don't know what it was about it. I just didn't really draw me in that much. Don't get me wrong, like the visuals and everything like that for the scenery, like outdoor shots, and even like in when you're in the cities and everything like that, like amazing, like looks really great with the cinematography. But just something very lacking in like what went on. Really, I felt myself kind of like veering away, like sometimes, like just what do you say about the contrast from um the other film, like you can't look away for 2 seconds, but I felt like myself like occasionally just looking away for a moment, but still kind of getting the sense of what was going on. If that makes sense, I don't know
Hmm.
if that's a good or a bad thing, but take it as you will. But um, it, I don't know. It's just like there's this. It just how it all came about was it felt a bit disinterested. If that's
Yeah, no,
but
it's a
yeah.
bit of an interesting one in that sense because I feel very similar, where I feel like I have to watch because the performance is so good, but
Hmm.
everything else just falls. And I don't think everything else is necessarily bad per se. I just find it very flat. Um, you know, I don't think there's any altruistic flourishes to kind of point this to being a Truffaut film. Like, I don't think it's exceptionally directed or anything like that. It feels very serviceable the whole way through, but I was never wowed by
Hmm.
how something was shown. Um, like if I watched this film and didn't read the credits, I could have sat here all day guessing what director made it, and I would have never said
Yeah.
Truffaut. So it lacks that kind of auteur flair. I actually found the cinematography to be very bland, which is surprising because this was shot by Nestor Almondaros, who's an Oscar-winning cinematographer. He did the cinematography for Days of Heaven, which is one of the most beautiful films ever made, and also a period piece. Like I found the visuals to be, quite flat. Apart from perhaps that kind of opening sequence as she's coming in on the rowboat, where there's this kind of her pale face just kind of
Yeah.
breaks the darkness. That's well done. But like other than that, there's nothing that really wowed me too much from a cinematography point of view. Um, the support cast, they're serviceable. Um, I suppose one thing that really kind of gets me a little bit is that um, Bruce Robinson, who plays the quote unquote love interest, I guess, for the lack of a better term,
Yeah.
he's the most uncharismatic person to pick for this kind of role. Where I'm just sitting here going, "Girl, like,
Could do
why?
better. Yeah.
Why are you bothered with this guy? Just you, you are Isabella Gianni. Go find a better man than this boring asshole." Now I know this obviously, maybe it's a stupid nitpick because this is, a true story. This is how it played out. But I feel like the casting of Bruce Robinson, I know what they were doing with it because, you don't really want to cast someone who's too likable because then you know, you're gonna be like devastated that he's this really nice guy, but for some reason he just does not want her. But I think they went too far away, too far in the opposite direction, where they've made him so unlikable that I just couldn't fathom why she would be bothered in the first place. And I know she's portrayed as obviously very naive. This is her kind of first love, and it's implied that perhaps he, whispered sweet nothings in her ear to kind of get with her, just because she was good looking or whatever, or she was in a position of power, and he was never really interested in the first place. It's all kind of, implied perhaps.
Mhm.
Um, but he's just so uncharismatic and just so annoying that I'm just like she shouldn't be bothered with this guy. And this is no disrespect to Bruce Robinson, who, a lot of people probably don't know him for his acting. Most people probably know him for the fact that he wrote and directed Withnail and I. That would be his biggest kind of claim to fame. If you asked him what he was famous for, that's what he would probably tell you. So I don't mean any disrespect to Bruce, um, who's probably not listening, but just in case he is, I don't mean any disrespect to him. I think it's partially an issue with directing. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of problems I have with this film, but then I just sit back and think, but the performance is so good. Uh, it kind of it kind of balances out. Again, I don't think it's a great film, but it's such a great performance that I still think the film is worth watching purely for that, if that makes sense.
No, I get what you mean. I say like there's so many moments in the thing where Isabel uh, is is doing such a great like she's got like do we say like the pale face thing, and then she's got like there's a moment where she's like sat in bed like writing the letters and everything, and
Mm.
she's got like like the when you like to tell you've been crying, and it's kind of just like that kind of like that you can just feel like the emotion coming from her in
Yeah,
that scene really like, and then there's other bits, but then shades of obviously where she's in possession, where she kind of acting a bit cray cray, shall we say, when like she's like almost like desperation when she's kind of like meeting Pinson in the street or whatever or
hmm,
anything like that. And she's like, please, no, please, I love you, kind of thing. It's like, oh, yeah. Again, if it's based off a true story, I guess this is kind of what happened. But yeah, it peaks and valleys with her, how the performances go. But generally, for what she gives us, like she is the focus that you want to you're here for the film, and I mean that there's like I kind of like the fact there's like um but there's very similar like these sort of frames within frames where you kind of like you're either looking out from a window or you're looking into a window as well. So that in terms of cinematography, in that sense, it's really, really, really striking. And there's also, again, it's almost like feels like the camera is constantly moving as well at times, where you're kind of just like following Adele around, like you know, like you're the lovelorn for her, really. Like you just kind of like, oh, where's she going, like kind of thing, like, oh, come back, kind of thing, or whatever. Just let's see where's she going. So keeping the interest on her essentially, because as I say, it is about the film is about her.
Yeah, she like I said, she's the kind of gravitational force from a technical and a narrative point of view. The film is called The Story of Adele H, and it is just it's the film of Adele H. Everything moves around her, which makes sense. You know, when you get lucky and you end up casting someone as talented as Isabella Gianni, you're going to make her the sole focus as much as possible. You're going to try and milk a performance out of her that will propel and drive the rest of the film. I guess my main issue, what kind of sums up my thoughts on this, is that there's only so much that she can do to try and paper over the cracks in the rest of the film. You know, you can distract me with Isabella Gianni as much as you want, but I noticed the other things too, which took me out of it a little bit and kind of made this one maybe plummet down a little bit in my ratings. But I certainly like I said before, even though I don't think the film is great, the performance is. So, you know, if you're on the fence about this, you know, as a listener, you know, I wouldn't be expecting, like, even like we talk about auteurs who are, you know, doing period pieces for the first time, and you think of like, you know, Scorsese doing Age of Innocence. Like Age of Innocence is a million times better than this film. In terms of someone who's known for doing contemporary films, doing something, you know, a bit more novelistic. Scorsese did that better in my opinion. So the Story of Adele H is not near the quality of something like Age of Innocence, but I think the lead performance of Isabella Gianni and Adele H elevates it to the point where it is definitely worth watching this film because her performance is so good, and people should experience that performance.
Yeah, wholeheartedly. Yeah, don't take my my word for like send a downer on it or anything like that. But it is really for her performance alone, it's worth checking out. I'll leave it at that.
For sure. Perfect. Look, those were the releases for November. So as I said, we're recording this on the 5th of December. Just with Christmas and stuff coming up, I'm probably not going to have a time to do a Vault episode, which is a little bit unfortunate because I didn't get to do one in October either. But I'm going to be back in early January for an episode I'm really looking forward to, because we're going to be looking at the Luis Buñuel box set. Alongside Yokohama BJ Blues and The Man from Mallorca, and of course whatever gets announced for April, we'll be discussing. Then I'll be coming back with a podcaster that I'm very looking forward to sitting down with. I've been a fan of his podcast for a long time, so that will be announced obviously a little bit closer to the time on all of the socials. I don't remember if I mentioned it last time out, but I'm on Bluesky now. I'm going to be using that much more than I'm going to be using X/Twitter. So if you're on Bluesky, you can give me a follow at Adam Lundy. I'll put the link in the description. All of Paul's links will also be in the description as well. Go check out his podcast, give him a follow on Instagram and Bluesky and stuff like that as well. Paul, again, it's been a pleasure having you on. I appreciate you taking time out of your evening to come and talk about these films with me. It's been a blast having you on.
Well, thank you very much for having me on as well. It's been a great time. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Thank you for listening. To hear more shows from the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network, please select the link in the description.
If you're looking for more horror outside of the mainstream, look no further than Unsung Horrors, a podcast about underseen horror movies. I'm Lance.
And I'm Erica. Every other week, we'll cover a horror movie with fewer than 1,000 views on Letterboxd. We'll even give you double feature recommendations to pair with the movies we discuss.
From gothic to shot on video, from slashers to comedies, from giallo to J-horror, we'll cover all the subgenres. So join us as we unearth these hidden gems of horror.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at Unsung Horrors, available wherever you listen to podcasts. And part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Hello, my name is Kevin Tudor, and I'm one of the 3 hosts of Almost Major, a film podcast dissecting many major indie studios and the films they release. Every week, myself, Charlie Nash, and Bryden Doyle discuss overlooked, forgotten, or bona fide classic indie films via studio-specific miniseries. We've previously covered numerous films from Artisan Entertainment, Lionsgate Films, and New Line Cinema. Titles including The Blair Witch Project, American Psycho, Dogville, But I'm a Cheerleader, Saw, Requiem for a Dream, and Ringmaster, you know, the Jerry Springer film. Anyways, we have a fun time every week and we hope you will join us. Subscribe to Almost Major wherever you get your podcasts. Now proudly a part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.